Welcome to my channel. My name is Anais Lesa. I'm glad to have you here. So the first story that I have for you is actually I'm the main character in the story. It's a story that's really close to my heart, and I actually want to shed light upon it because I think that many women could benefit from it, and that is the deadly aspect of plastic surgery in the South Florida area. So before we continue, let's take it back to January of 2015 when I had received a $2,500 bonus at work as well as a raise. I was really ecstatic, and my first thought was, well, maybe I could put this money to good use by getting a liposuction of my thighs. And so I actually saw a plastic surgeon in the Clearwater, Florida area, and he had quoted me a price of $10,000 just for my thighs. So I was like, okay, that's kind of expensive. I'm just gonna forget about it. So I continued just looking around Florida, and I actually noticed that in the Miami area, the pricing was really cheap. So I got in contact with Vanity Cosmetic Surgery Center in April of 2015. Well, April 20th of 2015 to be more specific. I called, and Leah, supposedly she was the surgical coordinator, introduced herself, told me what Vanity Cosmetic Surgery Center had to offer, and said that, they specialize in, Brazilian butt lifts. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not interested in Brazilian butt lift. I just want to do my thighs. And she's like, well, if you want to do your thighs, that's fine, but you will also have to do your abdomen. And I'm like, okay, why do I have to do my abdomen? But I didn't really question it. I was like, okay. She said, send me your pictures. I need to, bring them to the doctor so we can review them. And then, he will give you some, further, he'll make some suggestions. And I was like, okay, that's cool. So I sent her the pictures in a bathing suit. It was a little embarrassing, but I did so anyway. She ended up emailing me back on April 22nd of 2015. Now, according to the email, she said that I have a nice butt, but that it definitely could use some filling and shaping. And she stated that the doctor had recommended that I do a Brazilian butt lift. I got on the phone with her after reading that email, and I told her clearly, I'm not interested in the Brazilian butt lift. I'm just not interested. I already have a big butt. Why would I be interested? And she's like, okay, that's fine. You are gonna have to do your abdomen. You can include your thighs for $500. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Okay. She did say that it would be $3,500 for my abdomen and my thighs, and that I would either have to pay in cash or do a wire transfer. Now, at that time, I was living in Indian Rocks Beach, Florida. That's like a 3.5, 4-hour drive from Miami. So there was no way that I could actually go to their office and pay before the end of the month, because their special supposedly ended on April 30th of 2015. So I was like, okay, that's cool. I'll wire you the money, but I do need some confirmation that in case the surgery doesn't go through, that you're gonna refund my money. She proceeds to send me the peace of mind refund policy, in which, according to the refund policy, I would have no trouble, getting my money back should I need to cancel. I was okay. I felt a peace of mind, so I did the wire transfer on April 29th of 2015, sent her confirmation. At that point, she sent me an email just saying, you're gonna have your surgery with Dr. Osak Omulepu on May 14th, 2015. And she gave me access to the Vanity portal, the patient portal. I was like, okay, that's great. She also sent me, she also said that I needed to get lab work done and that I could do so, in the Clearwater area. And I was like, okay, that's cool. I kind of get antsy at that point because I was noticing that after they got my money, they were being very careless. They were just being careless. They didn't really want to answer my questions. So I call and I say, hey, I actually want to see the doctor prior to my surgery. So, I just have some anxiety about the surgery and I would prefer to see him. And, talked to the receptionist. She said, yes, that's completely fine. You can actually come in on Saturday. We are open. You can also get your labs done while you're here. And so on May 2nd, I drive to Miami. Okay, here I'm driving, thinking, I'm gonna get to talk to Dr. Osak Omulepu. So I get there, and this building was, I don't know, I have had plastic surgery before, and this building was just it looked like it was a strip mall. Well, it was a strip mall. It was in a yellow mustard building, and it just, I don't know. Looking back, I probably should have canceled at that time. So I go into the lobby, and I see several women, and you can tell they're doubled over in pain. I'm assuming they had a Brazilian butt lift, or maybe a breast augmentation, or what have you, and that's why they were in so much pain. I also saw what appeared to be family members, maybe to give them emotional support. And so I get there, and a lady comes out. She takes me to the back room with a phlebotomist. Her name was Lady proceeds to ask me what I'm having done. I say, well, I'm having my thighs and my abdomen done. She's like, honey, you need to get your butt done. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not really interested. She's like, no. If you get your butt done, it's gonna look like you did so many squats at the gym. It's just gonna be perky. It's gonna be big and beautiful. And like, yeah, okay. I'm not like gonna argue with her. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll think about it. So at that point, after she drew my blood, and I had asked her before, I had also asked her, hey, how long is my lab work gonna take? And she's like, you should have it by, Monday or Tuesday at the latest. It really doesn't take that long. And I'm like, okay, that's great, because, I didn't want to have my blood work, something bad come up, not bad, but, just an abnormality. And then my dad books the flight, and then, it was just gonna cause a fiasco. So I'm kind of relieved, like, okay, fine, that's great. And so after that, a lady named Cynthia comes out, and she, tells me, I know you're having a liposuction to your thighs and your abdomen. We sell fajas, which are like compression garments here. And, I recommend that you buy one from us that goes past, kind of towards your knee area, because, we need to make sure that your thighs are compressed. And I'm like, how much is it? And she's like, $150. I'm like, yeah, no, it's okay. I'll buy my own faja. That's not going to be an issue. At that point, I asked her, hey, can I see Dr. Omulepu? She's like, hey, you're going to have to talk to the receptionist. That's up to her. I go to the receptionist. I tell her, hey, I drove here 4 hours to see Dr. Omulepu, and I was told that I could. And, she said, sorry, but Dr. Omulepu is actually not going to be able to see you because he has a busy schedule. And I had seen Dr. Omulepu while I was in the back room. He was dressed in a surgical gown, and he was just running around and just asking one of the staff members, hey, when's the next patient coming in? When's the next patient coming in? So at that point, I realized, well, I'm not going to argue. Obviously he's busy, and I don't want to wait here hours on end hoping that he may come out and see me. So I get out of there, and I'm driving back home, and another 4-hour drive. Yeah. And 20 minutes into my drive, I get a call from Cynthia, and she's like, hey, you have to come back. You did not sign the paperwork. I'm like, well, Cynthia, you didn't tell me that I had paperwork to sign. You told me I was good to go. The receptionist said the same thing. She's like, no, you're gonna have to come back in. You have to sign these, this paperwork. I'm like, okay, you know what? I don't want any bumps in the road. Let me go back and sign this paperwork. So I go back, and I'll once again escorted to one of the back rooms. I signed the paperwork, and unfortunately, I wish I would have known at that point what was to happen, because otherwise I would never have signed those that paperwork. So it was a big folder of just papers, Anyway, I head out, and at that point I had seen how disorganized they were. So Starting on like May 6th, I'm calling the medical assistant who is now my point of contact at Vanity, and I'm like, hey, Yesenia, that was her name. I need to know what, how my blood work is, coming along. I was told that I should have it by now. And she's like, in a very rude manner, she's like, well, you know what, your blood work's looking great, okay, but we need to test it twice. We test everybody's twice for HIV. And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, we send this lab work to Tallahassee to test it twice. And I'm like, why would you have to test it twice? If I'm not a medical professional, but I'm assuming that if an HIV test, if done properly the first time, is either going to be reactive or non-reactive. But I'm like, okay, whatever. May 9th rolls around and I call and I'm like, you know what? I'm ready to cancel this. You're not giving me any answers as to how, what my blood work is looking like. And my father, has to book a flight at this point. We're talking literally days away from my surgery. So this, this conversation between Yesenia and I happened at 9 a.m. of May 9th. And I just get into a heated argument. I'm like, I'm going to cancel, I'm done with you all. This is, the customer service, your work ethic is just horrible. I get a call at 10:50 a.m. and I'm told that my blood work came back and everything looks phenomenal. And that, and then they emailed me the blood work, as confirmation. Now, looking at the blood work, this, they had sent this blood work into a laboratory called Finlay Laboratory Inc., located in Miami. So I'm not sure why they would have to send it to Tallahassee to get it tested twice. I'm not sure. It's just so confusing to me. I'll never understand that. Maybe it was just an excuse from Yesenia. And according to the paperwork from Finlay, they had reported the results on May 4th. So why was there this long delay and runaround? I still don't understand it, and I'll never understand, apparently. So May 13th comes around and my dad, is flying in. I also get a call from Vanity and I'm told that I have to be at Vanity at 7 a.m. sharp, ready to go for surgery. And I'm like, okay. So my dad flies in, I pick him up after work, and we drive directly to Miami. And he was tired, I was tired, but I just want to get this over with. Till this day, I'm so thankful my dad actually came and helped me out, because at first I was like, Dad, don't worry about it, I can do it on my own. He's like, no, absolutely not, I'm going to be there for you. So we drive, we get there at 6:46 a.m. at Vanity, and there's no one there. Like, there's a staff member there, and like, we're gonna call Dr. Omulepu, but and they call him and he's not picking up. And so they walk me into one of the smaller lobbies that's now empty because it's so early in the morning. What I did hear was, I did hear some music coming from like a surgery room and a doctor, I guess, performing surgery. It was like, this music was so loud. I'm like, this is like so odd to me. I don't know why it was odd. Like, there's somebody laying there and this doctor has like the song Bailando by Enrique Iglesias in the background. It was really weird, but anyway, but finally I'm told at around 8:15 that I have to come back to the back room because they're actually, surgery is imminent, and Dr. Omulepu apparently had finally answered his phone. So I go to the back room, but before I do so, I told my dad, I know you haven't slept. You should go, to the hotel room and sleep, and I'll call you once surgery is done. And he agreed, and I was glad because, he had flown in, driven me 4 hours, and now it was time for him to rest. So I go back to the back room, and Dr. Omulepu's there. He basically tells me, hey, what surgery are you having done? And I'm like, excuse me, what surgery am I having done? Don't you know? Aren't you the doctor? Haven't you seen my chart? And he's like, and I told him I'm having my abdomen, my bra line, and my thighs. And I handed him a paper that they had given me, which clearly stated that he was going to do my thighs. And he looked me square in the face and he said, yeah, I'm not doing your thighs. I'm like, why? And that's what we agreed upon. And he's like, yeah, I don't do thighs. And I'm like, okay, you know what? We need to cancel. And I told him that we need to cancel. And it's like, yeah, that's fine. You can cancel, he said, but just be aware that you're going to lose $1,500. I'm like, what? You're the one that's breaching the contract. Why am I going to lose $1,500? It's like, so I'm here, I'm having like this little nervous panic attack within me, and I'm thinking, do I want to lose $1,500 of the $2,500, you know, bonus that I worked so hard for? And at that moment, if I had known what would have happened in the future, I obviously would have canceled, but I didn't. I went through with it. And so he marks my body, and as he's doing so, he's like, I noticed that you're not doing a Brazilian butt lift. And I'm like, nope, not doing it. I have a big butt, don't eat it. And he's like, no, you know what? You have big boobs and you already have a big butt. So if we transfer that fat to your butt, oh my gosh, you're gonna look cartoonish. I'm like, what? I don't want to look cartoonish. Okay. It's like, okay, I'm gonna talk to my mom. And he's like, no, don't talk to your mom. Your mom's gonna tell you not to do it. Go call one of your friends. Your friend will convince you to do it. I'm like, absolutely not. I still call my mom, explain the situation. I told her that I'm upset that they're not going to do my thighs. She's like, yeah, I mean, I would be upset too. Who wouldn't? I mean, they're breaching the contract. Anyway, we finally, you know, I tell him I'm not going to do it. You know, he already had he had his assistant come out with paperwork for me to sign, additional paperwork to do the Brazilian butt lift. And I'm like, nope, keep your paperwork. So at 11:04 a.m., I go into surgery. I'm put under anesthesia, and I just fall asleep. I wake up around 2 p.m., and I'm in a back room, and I'm in like so much pain. I'm talking excruciating pain. And I'm feeling this, you know, I don't know if it was a nurse or nurse's assistant, but they're putting on the compression garment, the faja, and they're just tightening everything up. And I hear one of them say, estas idiotas como chillan, de perdida esta no está llorando tanto, and which roughly translates to in English as, these idiots are crying, at least this one's not crying. She was referring to two other women who were in other beds not too far from mine, and they were crying because they were in pain. Obviously they were crying. And she was, you know, saying that I wasn't crying too much. And I don't know if I was or not, but I thought that was just like crude, rude, and a commentary that was unnecessary. I think they thought that I wasn't awake, but obviously I was. Anyway, they, you know, tell me to call my dad, which I do. And before my dad comes, Dr. Omulepu comes into the room. And you would think that he would want to rate my pain, maybe ask me how I'm doing. No, instead he stands right in front of me while I'm doubled over in pain, and he yells at me. He yells at me to sit up. Yells at me to sit up. Even till this day, I can't believe that a medical professional would do that. Anyway, I try to sit up. I can't. I'm still in a fetal position. He leaves the room. My father comes to pick me up. Now, I'm told to, you know, I had two drains. I had one in the front and one in the back, or lower back area. I'm told to drain the fluid ever so often, anytime it would fill up. And so I do that when we get to the hotel. There was this point that I've, you know, felt really weak. I decided to go to bed around midnight. But at around 4:30-ish a.m., I wake up and my heart is racing. I'm kind of disoriented. I turn on the light and I notice that my entire bed is soaked in blood. The drains had popped and there was just blood everywhere. It was horrendous. And that's when I was in a panic. I, you know, banged on the door because there was a door separating my hotel room from my father's. And my dad rushes in and I tell him, you know what, I'm dying. We need to get to the hospital. We rush to the car. I'm crying, and that car ride was the longest car ride ever. I now realize it probably wasn't that long, but being that I was actually feeling the life drain out of me. And so at that point, I call my mom and I call my brother. My sister, I don't know where she was at that moment, but she wasn't there. But my mom and my brother were, and I told them that I love them, because I really thought that I was about to die. And they're crying and I'm crying. And we get to the hospital and I hang up, and one of the nurses, she looks at me and she's like, she's unstable. You all need to get a wheelchair. And I was immediately admitted to the hospital for 3 days, from May 15th up until the 18th. And during that time, they made sure that my heart was functional, that no surgical tools had been left in within me, that I didn't have like a pulmonary embolism or anything of that sort. Thankfully, and it was discovered that I had lost so much blood that I needed a blood transfusion, and I was not clotting, so I also needed plasma. At first they thought, well, one of the doctors even said, do you have a clotting disorder, because you're not clotting properly? And I'm like, no, not that I'm aware of, and I've had other surgery before, so this is new to me. Anyway, my dad calls Dr. Omulepu. Dr. Omulepu answers and tells my dad, you know what, I can't go to the hospital because I'm in surgery, and I'm going to be in surgery till 11 p.m. Yeah, he didn't care. He did not give a flying F if I was dying in the hospital. He finally does come to see me on the last day, which was the evening of May 17th. My dad tells him to get out of there, that, he wasn't there in the beginning, he should leave. Dr. Omulepu turns to my dad and he says, you know what? I came here to talk to your daughter. I didn't come here to talk to you. And so I'm nervous and I'm like having like an anxiety attack. But during that episode, I asked him, one, has anybody ever died under your care? And he's like, no, thankfully. And he knocks on wood. And the second question is, how many people go and get a liposuction and need a blood transfusion? He's like, only 1% to 2%, so you're a rarity, but it does happen. At that point, my dad tells him to get out. He finally does get out, and the next day I'm released. Now the next day I go get a lymphatic massage to try to drain out all the fluid, and I also my father and I went to Vanity to get a refund on the $500 because they had not done my thighs. They had breached the contract, and they refused. They did not want to give me my $500 back. We even called the cops and they still refused. So they finally, after much my dad fighting with them over the phone, they finally did send a check for $500. Now at this point I do end up going to Kentucky to be under the care of my mom and my dad, because I was in so much pain. It was horrible. It felt like my stomach was stretched apart. That's how I can best describe it. And there was a dilemma once I got to Kentucky. I had 2 drains in me, and I was not able to get them out on my own, and I was afraid that I was gonna do damage if I even tried pulling them out. So I go to a plastic surgeon who will remain unnamed, because I haven't asked for his permission to use his name. What I will say was that he was kind, he was very knowledgeable. I go in there and he tells me, I'm not sure why they use drains. Drains should not be used during liposuction. You should only be bleeding about a teaspoon at most through the incision areas, and that's about it if you use enough to mess in solution. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure. And he tries to pull it out and he's like, yeah, I'm sorry, I think you require light sedation. If you don't go and get these removed, you run the possibility of getting an infection. So at that point he said, you should go to the emergency room. We immediately go to U of L emergency room, the University of Louisville emergency room, where they look at me and they're like, yeah, we've seen other women come here from South Florida with complications from plastic surgery done there, but we're not going to be able to remove your drains. And I'm like, why? and they said, you know, we can't remove the drains because otherwise, if something should happen to you, we're going to be liable. And so now I'm left with this dilemma that I have 2 drains, and there's the possibility, from what I was told, that they could get infected. So I end up going and calling the plastic surgeon who had done my breast augmentation back in 2010. He says, sure, come in. I'm going to charge you $50, but I'm going to be able to extract them. And I'm just so grateful. And I'm like, I don't care if you charge me $300. I just want these drains out. So I go in, he looks at them, and he's like, I'm not sure why they put drains in there, but if he used enough to mess in solution, he shouldn't have to use drains. In fact, he said, I haven't seen drains being used in liposuction since the early 1980s. And so I'm like, okay, you know, I'm not sure why. And he's like, you know, he kind of reprimanded me. He said, you should have called me and I could have recommended a good plastic surgeon in the Miami area. Anyway, he yanks out the drain. It's painful. And once he yanks it out, he like kind of looks at it and he's like, yeah, it hurts because this is an outdated drain. It has like a hook. And when I pulled it out, you know, that's the reason it hurts so much. He looks at the other drain. He notices that there's fluid still coming out, you know, quite a bit of fluid. And so he tells me, hey, come back in early next week once the fluid level has gone down, and I'll be more than happy to take it out. Thankfully, that drain actually fell out while I was taking a shower a day or 2 later. And that part of the dilemma was done and over with. At what, you know, kind of right after that, I would say in the middle of June, I went back to Indian Rocks Beach where I was living at. And my dad said, you know, you need to file a complaint with the Florida Department of Health. So I proceed to do so. A few days later, I'm not sure when, but I received a large packet from the Florida Department of Health addressed to me. It had my name, had my address. It was it cost them $16.20 to send it to me, and it was certified. So I open up the package, and I'm expecting to see my complaint and possibly my medical records. Yeah, that's what I was expecting, but that's not what I saw. Nope, not what I saw. I actually received 362 pages of medical records that weren't mine. They were somebody else's. They were from a woman who lived or lives in Pensacola, Florida. And I'm in shock. So I'm like looking through these medical records, not to, you know, I didn't want to breach her, you know, the patient's privacy, but I was hoping my medical records were in there, and they're not. So I called the Florida Department of Health, and I'm like, you know what? You sent me the wrong medical records. You know, this is somebody else's. You basically violated HIPAA law. And instead of being apologetic and maybe being like, oh, I'm so sorry, you know, let's rectify the situation, they kind of like sound grumpy over the phone. And I'm like, you need to do something about it because I'm not keeping these medical records here. And they said, okay, we're going to send an investigator. And they do. So on June 23rd, 2015, they send an investigator who picks up the medical records, the 362 pages. Yeah. It's horrible. So after that incident and after I filed my complaint, I expected something to happen, and nothing really happened for a long time. So my dad kind of just fought on my behalf, and I just want to forget about it. But I'm thankful that my dad did go and continue the fight, because if it wasn't for him, I'm quite sure that Dr. Omulepu's license would not have been revoked. Now, his license was revoked on April 2017, sometime in April 2017, and it was not only due to the fact that he had injured me. Okay, it was due to the fact that from May 14th up until May 16th, he injured 4 women, including myself. Exactly. And in my case, it was discovered that he had actually not used enough tumescent solution, which is why I bled so profusely. And he did not keep, great medical records as he should have as a professional. And in the other cases, I know in some of the cases, in one of the cases, he perforated somebody's liver. In another case, he perforated somebody's small intestine and then injected fatty tissue into her sciatic nerve. And I mean, these were 4 women, okay, within the span of a few days. And those were the cases that were brought forth in front of the Florida Department of Health. Let me tell you, I talked to several women, okay, several women who were injured by him and who also had to go to the hospital to get a blood transfusion, okay. Some of those women did not want to come forward. They wanted to just forget about the incident. They did not file complaints, but it happened. And at that point, his license was revoked. Now, unfortunately, he appealed that, okay? He was trying to appeal that. So he's still able to practice and do surgeries. And that's what he was doing on June 1st, 2017, while he was working at Seductions. Now, at Seductions, a young woman of 30 years old and a mother of 6 children had flown in from Illinois to get a Brazilian butt lift. And this woman unfortunately passed away under his care. I'm sorry, every time I think about that, I place myself in her shoes and I kind of see myself and think, that could have been me. That could have been my ending. And now these 6 children are left without their mothers. And not just the children, her family, her friends, her colleagues, people who knew her. And so she passed away, and I believe it was from a fat embolism, and she died at the hospital. And of course, at that point, his license was, of course, revoked, and he is no longer able to practice in the state of Florida anyway, medicine. This doctor was not board certified. He was very crude, and he was very rude to me as well. And I'm glad that his license was revoked. Now, the owner of Vanity Cosmetic Surgery Center is another doctor by the name of Ismael Labrador. Okay, he studied in Cuba, came over here, and in 2000, I believe it was 2007, he actually hired people, and he allowed these people who were unlicensed to perform procedures on people, and he didn't care until and then later on, about 3 years later, he was fined by the Florida Department of Health in the amount of $28,000, okay? And then he was, I believe, given 100 hours of community service as well as 36 months of probation. The problem is that he had several clinics, or has several clinics. I haven't really looked into him lately, but he had several clinics, including Vanity Cosmetic Surgery Center, and his clinics were tied, as of 2019, to the deaths of 8 women. That's correct, 8 women. And according to the Florida Department of Health, if you look him up, he's still practicing medicine, and his license is active and clear. So nothing was ever done to him, despite the fact that he had these little clinics, and anytime a death or an injury or something would occur, he would just immediately change the names of these clinics, so people couldn't actually associate the prior clinic to the next little clinic that he would open up under just a different name. So I really think he should have been fined, or something should have been done to him as well, because he's a professional supposedly, and he's allowing these practices to run rampant in his clinics. So I want this to serve as a cautionary tale to anybody who wants to proceed with doing plastic surgery, whether it be in South Florida or any other area of the nation, or abroad as well. I would recommend that you get a board certified plastic surgeon. I recommend that you get a surgeon who has medical malpractice insurance, because in my case, despite the fact that that there was negligence, despite the fact that they breached the contract, because Dr. Osak Omulepu did not have medical malpractice insurance, I was never given any sort of compensation, and no attorney wanted to take the case due to that very fact. So I would definitely recommend that. I recommend that you see the plastic surgeon way prior. Okay, you have an actual physical consultation with the surgeon, okay, and talk to him or her about your fears, your worries, your expectations, and that way there's no misunderstandings. Anyway, I hope that this serves as a cautionary tale to anybody who's thinking of doing plastic surgery. If you want to see some of the paperwork that was, the email exchange between Vanity and I and things like that, I would recommend that you follow my Instagram. I also have a Patreon. On that Patreon, I will actually, make a video discussing my other plastic surgery experiences. Nothing traumatic. Those plastic surgeries that I did have done were with a very reputable doctors and with good reviews. But if you're interested in that, I would go ahead and, help your girl out and, just check out my Patreon if you're interested. And of course, I am so happy to have you here. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment down below. The comment that resonates with me the most will be pinned to the very, very top, okay? And I love you guys, and thank you so much for joining me.